And before the music team comes up to do our next couple of songs, we'll have our Bible reading for the passage that Matt will be talking to us about shortly. This is from Matthew 5, verses 1 to 12. Seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you."
Morning, everyone. And again, let me also extend a very warm welcome to our Sunday morning service. It is great to have you with us this morning. In case we haven't met, my name is Matt. I'm one of the leaders here at MCC. And this morning and next week, we'll be continuing a January series that we undertook at the start of the year last year. So we went through this January last year. We're working through it again January this year as well, and that is on the Beatitudes. So we're taking our time. We're moving very, very slowly through the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes. And so we did 4 last January. This January we'll be doing 3. 2 weeks ago, if you were here, you may remember that Tim kicked us off this year by looking at righteousness, the 4th Beatitude. Most commentators don't think that the sequence of the Beatitudes are any kind of accident, but that Matthew put them together in a particular sequence, so one built on the one before it. So it's not accidental. So mercy picks up, which is what we're looking at today, after righteousness. So if you've got your Bibles with you, please feel free to to follow along. There won't be much to kind of follow because it's really just one verse, but we're looking at Matthew chapter 5, verse 6. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. And here are the 3 things that I want to cover today. So I want to look at 3 things particularly. So here's the roadmap. Again, we're looking at this in pretty great detail. We'll take our time. Number 1, what is mercy? Number 2, what's the scope, if you like, of mercy? What are its boundaries or its parameters? And number 3, why show people mercy? Because I think that's a valid question, and it's probably a question that more and more people these days, particularly if they weren't if they didn't grow up or if they have no kind of religious faith at all, it's probably a question that they're asking more and more. Why show people mercy in the first place, particularly if they're obviously different from me and maybe on the polar opposite end of any particular important scale. So that's what we're looking at. But first, I figured it was worth asking the question, what makes mercy hard? What makes mercy difficult to sustain, particularly over the long term? Jason Isbell is a highly regarded American singer, songwriter of the moment. If you appreciate lyrics and storytelling, he's one of your guys to go to. If you don't mind a bit of country with your Western, he's definitely a good guy to go to. So that's Jason Isbell. And at the start of the whole COVID epidemic back in 2020, he wrote this song called "What Have I Done to Help?" "What Have I Done to Help" was the title of the song. And this is some of the lyrics from it. Again, so just think about this. It's at the start of COVID. He was based in America, pretty affluent, had a wife, kids, family. And this is what he wrote. "Climb to safety, you and me and the baby. Send our thoughts and prayers to loved ones on the ground. And as the days went by, we just stopped looking down. The world's on fire and we just climb higher till we're no longer bothered by the smoke and the sound. Good people suffer and the heart gets tougher. Nothing given, nothing found." So you can see the trajectory there that he maps out beautifully. You start off looking after and being concerned, if you like, showing mercy for you and yours. And you send out thoughts and prayers, like noble sentiments, to people who are suffering in your broader circle. But after a while, because again, you can still smell the smoke, you can kind of still feel the fire, a lack of kind of complementary action can start to sink in. there's a gradual, understandable withdrawal. So you move further and further away from those who are suffering, those who need mercy. And your heart can kind of harden as a result. So the world's on fire, and we just climb higher till we're no longer bothered by the smoke and the sound. So keep that kicking around your head as we further explore mercy this morning. Don't, because it's just so easy to kind of take it for granted and assume it's easy, but I'm going to try to make a case that mercy is hard. And I think, again, he just describes that beautifully. But first of all, what is mercy? So it seems to have two components. Mercy has two parts. One is a feeling, and then one is a subsequent action. So feeling and a resulting action. So think of the father in the parable of the prodigal son from the Gospel of Luke. He is running down the road to meet his returning lost boy, running down the road. So he had compassion. He had both a feeling, and then he runs, he acts. So that's one really potent example of mercy in action. Or think about Jesus in the Gospels. Numerous accounts that he heals the sick. And in some of those accounts, it says that first of all, he looked out on the crowds and he felt compassion. Jesus had feelings. He felt compassion. And then after that feeling is identified, he teaches the crowds. He heals the crowds. He ministers to them. So again, mercy seems to involve both a feeling and a resulting action. So that's a start. It's also, I think, helpful to think about what mercy is not. So what is mercy not? First of all, I'd argue it's not the same thing as our modern attitudes of, say, tolerance. So it's not just acceptance. Mercy is not the same thing as just being nice. It's not the same thing as turning a blind eye. It's not naive and certainly not deliberately denying the wrongs that people, myself included, do. And again, we find in the Beatitudes a really unflinching realization of just how complex human beings are. We know from personal experience, right? People that we love and who are most of the time worthy of our love can still do us harm, sometimes on a bad day intentionally. And we also know, if we're being ruthlessly honest with ourselves, you and I are capable of, again, on a bad day, hopefully, perpetuating really not nice things on some of the people that we love. And it's easy as a response to either of those scenarios to say, as more and more people are saying these days, look, just cut off anyone who's toxic in your life. Just cut them off. That's one extreme response. And the other is the people who say, listen, regardless of what they do, unconditional love looks like, not making a fuss, just accept it. Almost ignore it. Turn a blind eye to it for the sake of the relationship. They are two extreme responses. Mercy doesn't seem to be either of those. Mercy allows for disappointment. It makes space for frustration, and it's got some territory for even anger. But all those still eventuate in compassionate action. Does that make sense? So you might go through those feelings, but the end result is still compassionate action. And we know this because God in the Bible is repeatedly described as being merciful. But if you're familiar with the Bible at all, you also know that God exactly doesn't come off as being easygoing or nice, just nice, or not caring about evil and injustice. God instead is repeatedly recorded, like it's there in the text, that he can be angry at his creatures, again, not with a human kind of anger, but with a divine anger, a perfect anger. He can be angry with his creatures in creation when they disregard him and each other. But it still always eventuates in compassionate action. And it's also useful to remember that mercy is different from what we usually identify as grace. So John Stott, the great British theologian, wrote the following to help distinguish between grace and mercy. He said, mercy is compassion for people in need. The noun, Greek noun, helios, mercy, always deals with what we see of pain, misery, and distress. These are results of sin. And charis, that is grace, always deals with the sin and guilt itself. So the one, mercy, extends relief. Again, it's trying to alleviate the suffering. The other, grace, pardons. The one cures, heals, and helps. The other cleanses and reinstates. So grace, if you like, deals and looks at sin as a whole, whereas in mercy looks particularly at the pain that comes across from that sin and tries to alleviate it. So that's what, at least that's the best definition I've come up of mercy. A feeling against something like compassion, resulting from observing, being familiar with someone else's suffering, which then leads at some action, so some doing to help alleviate that suffering. That's mercy. So that's the first point. Now for the second. What's the scope of mercy? What are its parameters? How far should we go? And this is where it gets both, at least in my eyes, interesting, but also really confronting. Because true mercy seems to be costly. True mercy will cost us something. So think about that definition again. Feeling compassion due to someone else's suffering and then actually doing something to try to alleviate that suffering. That sounds, to me, honestly, like a whole lot of hard. For starters, compassion is a really nice sounding word, right? Like it's easy, it just rolls off the tongue and sounds beautiful. It's something that you admire in someone else, but it's often really hard to experience, right? Compassion is not the easiest feeling to actually feel because compassion is only like a couple of streets over from empathy and worry. If you feel true compassion, it's probably going to cost you some sleep down the line. It intrudes on your leisure time. Compassion, if you're feeling for someone, it kind of gets in the way of your relaxation. It's hard just to kind of sit there and binge through your latest streaming queue if you're consumed by compassion for your good friend who's just had some messy breakup with their partner. Compassion is costly. And then, on top of that, for the icing on the cake, you've got the resulting action. And that's a key point. Again, in Scripture, examples of compassion are costly and inconvenient. Here's how the American theologian and pastor Scott McKnight describes it. He said, inherent in the works of mercy is that the self-denying virtue of entering into the injustice and tragedies experienced by others. Entering into the injustice and tragedies of others. Merciful people are like the Good Samaritan, whose love interrupts his trip, like Jesus, who was constantly interrupted by those in need, and like James, the brother of Jesus, who sees the abusive treatment of the poor in the synagogue and speaks out on their behalf. So according to this definition, true mercy will involve interruption. It's going to be an inconvenience. You can't plan it, so to speak, and some measure of personal risk and likely cost. Now notice just how different this is to some of our modern ideas of showing compassion and mercy. Like, for example, signing that online petition for the good cause, or liking something that's been posted on social media about a virtuous cause, or even just signing the form at work to say that you've been through the mandatory appropriate behaviours training. All those things are great, all those things are worthy, they have their place. I'm not suggesting that they don't matter. What I am suggesting is that when Jesus talks about mercy, he is describing something that is radically different. Radically different. When the Good Samaritan stops to help a stranger who's been assaulted and robbed, he immediately places himself voluntarily in danger. Because when he joins that victim, he's exposing himself and making himself vulnerable to the same fate, right? He could just as easily be attacked when he's there helping someone else. Now, with all that in mind, Jesus doesn't seem to put any limits on mercy. There are no explicit boundaries. There's no, just look after your tribe, your ethnicity, your socioeconomic or political group. There's none of that. And I find that if I even start to kind of try to push back and somehow quantify the parameters or the boundaries of mercy, I risk sounding so much like the guy in the Gospels who asked Jesus, well, look, Jesus, really, just be straight with me, and let's be pragmatic here. Who is my neighbour? Just give me some definition, some boundaries around who my neighbour is. And of course, this has been made all the more complex and difficult by our global interconnection. So the Good Samaritan was just walking down the road in the story and virtually ran into someone who needed some mercy. Whereas in someone like me, and presumably you, all I have to do is open up my 24/7 online newsfeed and I will be just bombarded by so many people across the entire globe who could do with my mercy and my compassion. Does that make sense? It is overwhelming in that regard. So what do? Where do you go? As far as suggestions go, I think it's worth remembering that first of all, when it comes to mercy and any kind of potential parameters, we come with limits. We're creatures. Again, we talked about this before. We humans are common creatures. So we don't actually have the capacity to show endless mercy to everyone to the same degree over the long term. Does that make sense? That's just a great way to get callous or burnt out. That's not sustainable. So maybe the first answer in terms of where to direct mercy is to those in our immediate fields, if you like, of responsibility. It's worth remembering we are where we're currently placed by design and intent. God has placed us among a particular people in a particular time for a particular reason. That's no accident. So presumably God has some intent behind those people who are in our immediate field, those within our responsibility. He wants us to show them mercy at least. And maybe alongside that, we could petition God for more self-awareness. And by this, I mean being really honest with ourselves, asking God, maybe asking people who know you well. God, help me recognise what my risk is. And perhaps for most of us, our risk will be getting overwhelmed, perhaps, and becoming hard and callous. And as a result, not showing enough mercy because it starts to hurt too much. Does that make sense? So our hearts can grow hard. For others, I'd suggest that these people are in the minority. The risk they face is that they show so much mercy, they just get completely burnt out. So I think that's not my risk, but I think they're the two the two broad poles you can go. You either, again, get calloused and hard, or you completely implode because, again, you have burnt yourself out trying to show too many people too much mercy for too long. My risk is the former. So that's in line with that Jason Isbell lyric. Compassion is costly and hard. Getting close to other people's pain is tough. So over time, it just gets easier to put distance between myself and those who are suffering. And the last suggestion on this is just asking that God, and this can only come about as a result of a miracle, praying that God will make us vulnerable and actually help grow our hearts, which I think, as we talked about before, may be a tough process of having your heart broken to some degree, broken and messed up, with the faith that God can build a new one, a bigger one with more capacity, and one that more mirrors and approximates His. Does that make sense? A hard process of almost like spiritual evolution, where God over time miraculously grows and increases the capacity of our hearts to show mercy. And lastly, given the cost, given all that, why show people mercy in the first place? Why would you risk being merciful? I think there's at least two compelling reasons for this, and I think, to be honest, both these reasons are steeped in Christianity. They come from Christian origins. I know that there are plenty of other good reasons and good arguments for being merciful. I don't think they stand up as well as these two. And the first one of those two is that we show mercy as followers of Jesus to other people, regardless of their background or creed, because we view people in a very particular way. And this again speaks to how Christianity appreciates the complexity of people. On the one hand, it acknowledges that people are responsible for the choices that they make, for their moral and ethical behaviour. And we see that all through the story of Scripture. But running parallel to that theme of responsibility, almost as a check and a balance, is that Christians also believe that people, all of us, are victims of and influenced by dark, malevolent powers who are anti-human. So we're talking evil, sin, the devil. And the sway that these forces have over people, the influence that they possess, has to be taken into account when it comes to how we view other people. What I mean simply is that people are both the victims and perpetrators of evil. Both victims and perpetrators. It's that complex. There's no clear-cut good guys, bad guys. Now, please hear me, this is not an excuse for people's bad behaviour, and it's not something that we should just accept and not try to change in ourselves and others, but it's a factor, right? It's a factor that has to be taken into account when it comes to, if you like, ascertaining or even like judging people. So here are two examples from Scripture, just so you know I'm not making this up. Jesus is on the cross, and he's being knowingly betrayed and murdered by people who are motivated by envy, cowardice, and fear and greed. And even given all that, he can still pray, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Or take Stephen, the first recorded Christian martyr. He's being stoned to death by his fellow countrymen, his fellow Jews. And at the same time, he can pray, Lord, do not hold this sin against them. He knows at the same time they're capable and culpable, but he still also has the maturity, the perspective, amazingly so, to pray for their forgiveness. And I think that's because both Jesus and Stephen knew that people are swayed. Now, you may understandably find this hard to accept. I mean, not many people these days talk about malevolent forces, evil powers, and the devil, etc., etc. But if you just pause and reflect on your own experience in history, think about something that you still feel some degree of shame or regret about, as uncomfortable as that is. And we've all got them, right? So in the annals, like in the triple locked steel vaulted doors or rooms, there's some memories that give us some regard of pain and shame and regret to think about. Just extract one of those for me and ask yourself, when that occurred, when you did that thing that you now feel shame and regret for, was that all you? As in, was it your true self, your true ideal self, that maybe even got a perverse kick out of inflicting pain or suffering on another? Or was there a dark part that you still struggle to understand and make sense of in your life, let alone control, but you're certain that you could do without? Does that make sense? That's what I'm talking about. And that leads nicely to the last reason why we show mercy. As followers of Jesus, we believe that we've been recipients, first and foremost, of mercy ourselves. We know how much we need it. So when we show mercy, ideally, it's not from some elevated place of condescension. It's not from me stooping down from my incredibly high moral horse to do you a gracious favour as you're lying there in the gutter, surrounded by your own filth. It's not that. I show you mercy because I know first and foremost how much I needed it and how much I currently need it. And the more I'm aware in the moment of how much I need it, the more easier it's going to be to extend to someone else. So David Lloyd-Jones put it like this: the more you realise how desperately you need God's mercy and grace, the more you'll be inclined to show that same mercy to others. And really importantly, not because the others, in this example, are good, worthy, deserving people, or because they didn't hurt you or they didn't hurt themselves. On the contrary, they may have done all those things, but they're worth showing mercy to first and foremost out of gratitude towards God for the mercy he has shown and you've experienced firsthand. Is that making sense? So here's the thing, if that's true, I guess you could say mercy is not merit-based. First and foremost, it's not merit-based. Or to put it another way, me realising God has been merciful to me and how much I still need that mercy will naturally, hopefully naturally, result in me showing that same mercy and forgiveness to others. One of the leaders of the early church, James, wrote this in his letter, chapter 2, verse 13. He wrote, "Judgment without mercy will be shown to anyone who has not been merciful, and mercy triumphs over judgment. Judgment without mercy will be shown to anyone who has not been merciful, and that mercy triumphs over judgment." Mercy is more important than being right, which is often a hard pill to swallow, at least in my experience. Mercy is more important than being right. So, to conclude, perhaps it's worth asking ourselves, are we merciful? Do we often have those feelings that lead to actions that actually help alleviate other people's suffering? Do we see people who have wronged us as in some important way actually enslaved or under the undue influence of something just like we either are or have been or at risk of? Just like those Jason Isbell lyrics that we started with, we may have sent our thoughts and prayers to people who are suffering, and that's a great and necessary start to mercy. But if there's more to do, let's not just let it end there. Let's do more if we can. So I'd encourage you now to consider, how are you going to be merciful this week, over the next 7 days? How are you actually going to go about being merciful? There's so much going on in the world right now, if you're like me, that we have virtually no direct control over. So I could ask anyone in this room, I'm pretty sure I get the same answer. Are you going to be responsible for fixing what's happening in Minneapolis right now? Is that within your pay grade? Are you going to fix that up? Who here is going to handle the entire Greenland situation? Or perhaps if you just bring the whole Iran situation to a peaceful resolution, that'd be great. If someone here in the room could put their hand up for that, that'd be fantastic. Now, they're all worthy causes, and they're all worth praying about, let alone the other stuff that we don't hear so much about, like the increasing persecution that Christians are facing in China right now, and the real life martyrdom that's occurring in Nigeria. We should be praying about that. But I find, at least, it's so easy to read like the third or fourth long form article about, say, what's happening in Greenland and worry about that and fret about it, that I don't get around to thinking about what's happening or praying for those people in Nigeria or China, let alone the people who God has put in my immediate circle of influence that I can actually do something about when it comes to alleviating their very real suffering. Right here, right now, in our little worlds, we have so much direct control and opportunity for showing mercy to those people that God has definitely placed in our lives. There's something that we can actually do about that. If we're open and intentional, you've got to believe God will make it clear who he wants us to show mercy towards, and even how to go about it. So it could be the text that we should send. It could be the phone call that you have that niggling to make to that person. The money to give away because you know it would desperately help someone right now. The coffee and conversation that you could actually facilitate for someone in your life. The meal to drop off because you know people are busy and doing it hard. Or perhaps the babysitting that you could offer because those couple of parents haven't had a date night or whatever since Bill Clinton was the president or something like that. There's got to be something right here, right now that you could do to help someone, again, to alleviate some suffering in your world. So that's a good question. It could be a useful question. Who is God laying on your heart right now to extend mercy to over the next 7 days? That's worth pondering. Regardless, let's be merciful and let me pray. Father, I thank you for the teachings and the life and the example of your Son. I pray that you will help us get over our sometimes arrogance, our pride, the B-grade kick that comes with being or feeling morally superior to others. Help us push through all that and again just realise how honestly and desperately we need your mercy. I pray, Father, you won't make us naive, don't make us unduly idealistic. Please deliver us from burnout, but also help us not get ambivalent and callous. Help us respond to the people who you lay on our hearts, people who, again, are in our lives right now, who are suffering and who we could do something about, being your hands and feet to alleviate that. And I pray, help us do that out of grateful love towards you and love for our fellow humans. Amen.